It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to Columbia's first World Leaders Forum event of this academic year. We are joined this afternoon by the Prime Minister of Bhutan, Prime Minister Thinley. Prime Minister, we are delighted that you are able to be with us. Columbia's World Leaders Forum was launched in 2003 as a university-wide initiative for the purpose of supporting uninhibited dialogue on the most pressing economic, political, environmental, and social questions of our time. Questions that, with each passing year, have increasingly larger and larger global dimensions. And we take it as an article of faith here that the free exchange of ideas will be the best way to find remedies to the biggest problems we face. By allowing the university community to enter into discussions with leaders who are grappling with major challenges on the international stage, the World Leaders Forum allows Columbia to fulfill one of its most important duties as a global center of learning and research. The address we will hear today from Prime Minister Thinley is titled Well-Being, Happiness, and Leadership. I feel confident in saying that no other guest could possibly be as well equipped to address this subject. Bhutan is home to a unique civil society, one that for more than 30 years has been defined largely by the nation's focus on maximizing gross national happiness rather than the typical goal of increasing gross national product. Prime Minister Thinley was elected in the country's first national election in March 2008. Prior to the introduction of democracy to Bhutan, he served the previous government in several capacities, including as Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Home and Cultural Affairs. He has spoken on numerous occasions at sessions of the United Nations General Assembly, and last year the King of Bhutan awarded the Prime Minister the nation's highest civilian honor. Having first joined Bhutan's civil service in 1974, the Prime Minister's adult life has been inseparably intertwined with the modern history of Bhutan. Now the Prime Minister finds himself leading Bhutan through a period of extraordinary transition. Just over a decade ago, in 1999, television and the internet were introduced to Bhutan. In 2008, the nation held its first democratic election, 2 years after the king voluntarily abdicated his throne and ordered that the monarchy be replaced with a constitutional democracy. While it is certainly true that globalization has thrust changes of great magnitude upon many nations, and that the introduction of modern communications technologies and the spread of democratic governance are posing challenges for many societies, Bhutan's experience, informed by its commitment to gross national happiness, is unique. To enhance gross national happiness, Bhutan focuses on what it calls the four pillars: the economy, the culture, the environment, and good government. Today, the Bhutanese are evaluating the adoption of modern technology and democratic practices within this distinctive framework. The lessons from this transition will be instructive not only for the people of Bhutan, but for all the people of the world. In the months ahead, we will all be watching, therefore, with great interest as the events unfold in Bhutan. It is a set of circumstances that has no parallel elsewhere in the world today, except I would only add this. Columbia is widely known for many things, but it is known as the happiest university in the United States. All you have to do is see the students on the steps as you walk in here and just realize how happy a place this is. So, Mr. Prime Minister, you have come to the right place in the United States to address us. I am now pleased to introduce Bhutan's Prime Minister, Thinley, our first guest of this year's World Leaders Forum. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you.
Thank you very much, President Bollinger, Jean Bollinger, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, friends of Bhutan, fellow countrymen, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be invited to speak at the World Leaders Forum here on the happy and hallowed grounds of this renowned institution, the cradle of great minds nurtured by some of the most erudite mentors on the planet. Among these, I respectfully acknowledge my friends Professor Jeffrey Sachs and Joe Stiglitz, who is represented by his wife, Anya. To begin with, I would like you to know that it is perfectly understandable if a few among you are not aware of where in the world my little country is situated. Many years ago, before the advent of Google Maps, I suffered the frustration of explaining to an American grad student where it is. When I mentioned our contiguous neighbors, India and China, she wasn't sure where these two third world countries were. Finally, I thought of the great Himalayas and described how it lies within its protective folds. To my relief, she smiled and declared that she would never have guessed I came from Africa. So, if any of you wish to know where Bhutan is, of late, the country is a little better known, having become a subject of curiosity for the way in which our development process in the last 3.5 decades has been guided by the philosophy of gross national happiness. GNH is based on the belief that the purpose of development and the role of the state is to create conditions within which people can pursue and find what they aspire for most in life: happiness. It is a holistic development paradigm to make human society resilient. It motivates an individual and society to consciously balance material wants with spiritual growth, wherein the needs of the body and those of the mind are addressed in equal measure within a stable and sustainable environment. While many happiness indicators place Bhutan high in the listing, what I can quite safely claim is that we are the only country so far that promotes happiness through deliberate public policy and action. I'm here in New York to participate in the high-level segment of the UNGA at which the world leaders will deliberate on the progress of countries and the world in general on the 8 Millennium Development Goals. For Bhutan, the pursuit of MDGs is a part of the national effort to create the enabling conditions for happiness. But it is not very likely that there will be cause for joy at the global level at the United Nations this year. The progress worldwide has been unacceptably low, to use a phrase of the Secretary General. Yet, as many of you will agree, the attainment of MDGs is in fact a minimalist requirement in any society. Indeed, most of the goals are survival indicators, which every country must achieve. That is why, when we are confronted with the knowledge that there are countries which may not realize any of the goals, it is truly disconcerting. For this reason, it will not be with much pride that Bhutan will, on its part, report that it is well on track and that it will accomplish certain goals well before the target year of 2015. The special significance of the UN summit this year for my country is that after some quiet encouragement by Professor Jeff Sachs, Special Advisor to the MDGs to the United Nations Secretary General, my delegation will propose the inclusion of happiness as the 9th Millennium Development Goal. Thank you. We believe that the world's increasing understanding of the consequences of having allowed ourselves to be misguided by GDP into an unsustainable and self-destructive way of life has created the environment for the inclusion of this universal and timeless indicator. However, I do not intend to dwell on this subject here today. As it is the World Leaders Forum that I have the honor to address, I thought it appropriate to sketch from a particular perspective the nature of leadership itself and the challenges that all leaders must inevitably face. I believe that Western society as a whole is in the process of interpreting, or rather reinterpreting, and indeed recasting its concepts of both the good life and the good economy. This is sending beneficial ripples of awakening and a new consciousness across the world. In the years ahead, we in the developing countries will learn much from you with special interest as you undertake a reorientation of democratic politics and economic democracy in the direction of a more peaceful, equitable, and sustainable way of life. Our common challenges call for a kind of leadership that has the vision, will, and ability to reorient society as communities, as nations, and as a species that is threatened by its own actions. The gathering momentum of global problems that deprives us of the luxury of time to come up with solutions is what must weigh heavily on the minds of leaders and ought to stimulate their creativity. They need to be prepared to listen to even the radical thoughts today and accept the possibility that these may well become the dogma of tomorrow. In our search for solutions to the multiplicity of problems that confront society, leaders must be able to rise above ideological, historical, and economic fault lines that divide our world. They will need to find new ways to create a more harmonic world. How? Common understanding and cohesive ideas can be forged among disparate minds and nations against the paradox of globalization will test leadership as never before. Coming from the Himalayas and the Himalayan Buddhist culture as I do, I cannot resist citing the age-old notions of leadership, stemming from the Buddhist worldview that was earlier dominant in the Himalayan societies. I realize that the relevance of such a worldview will naturally be questioned. We have always believed that a leader is someone who possesses three mutually reinforcing qualities. These are compassion, knowledge, and strength. It is these three qualities, balanced in their composition and application, that transform and propel ordinary people to rise above the ordinary for the good of society. Separately, each of these qualities have little meaning. Knowledge and strength are by themselves dangerous. The knowledge of a leader must be steeped, especially in the pattern of existential suffering. So likewise, strength must mean will and capacity to alleviate suffering. These need to be motivated and tempered by compassion and a deep understanding of suffering, not only for humans, but all sentient beings. The strivings of aspirants to gain these intrinsic but cultivable qualities, give them public recognition and acceptance as leaders. There is no doubt that the forms and extent of suffering, from psychological to the relational, from physical to the mental, will always remain an inseparable part of human condition. But a leader must be aware that the power and potential to overcome them are equally present in all of us. The way a leader acts to remove suffering and raises the consciousness and capacity to do so in others is a primary yardstick of leadership. The Himalayan notion of leadership is therefore extremely broad and embraces the highest human values, going as it does far beyond the much narrower principles and practices of conventional management science and practices. The good thing about the quality of compassion is that, much like the muscles, it can be built, toned, and strengthened. And likewise, if it does not receive the benefit of exercise, it will gradually atrophy and disappear. More precisely, compassion can be obscured and suppressed by negative emotions. The approach to generating this quality is in consciously and purposefully breaking the barriers that separate us from being concerned about others and being sensitive to their suffering. Excuse me, I'll take a little bit of water. It would thus seem that compassion development would be an essential ingredient to be fused into modern leadership training. In a world of increasing professional and specialized expertise, the leader can certainly not be omniscient. But these are the three qualities through which she will be able to provide direction, inspiration, and stewardship. Let me now shift from this brief discussion on the ingredients of leadership to some of the regional problems, to the resolution of which these qualities may be applied. They are big in scale and multi-generational in scope. Search for their solutions demand multidisciplinary approaches and visualization of their effects as may unfold over decades and far beyond. As they are extensions of global problems, they will not be unfamiliar to you, Columbian students, and so my motive is in no way to undermine your knowledge, but simply to remind, so as to arouse your compassion and strengthen your determination to alleviate suffering. In citing an account of some of these problems, I shall put them in the context of their consequences on well-being and happiness, these being the primary concerns of good leaders. First, there is the continuing explosion of populations that will go well into the 2050s. The two giants, China and India, will bulge to become demographically obese. In the meanwhile, the aged population will have grown in Japan, China, Korea, Singapore, and others in hot pursuit. Even the young Bhutanese population will no longer be youthful in the next 25 years, presenting acute challenges for the care and financing of the elderly. As in the aging North, it will become progressively difficult to ensure the well-being of elderly people, especially as the responsibility for caregiving will shift rapidly from family to the state, from the natural to the artificial and the unsustainable. This would be a fundamental departure from and in marked contrast to our tradition. Throughout our history, the elderly received respectful care in the extended family and its network, which they themselves nurtured in their productive and able days. The extended family, in fact, has always been the cornerstone of our community and society. But it is now being shaken loose by the seismic changes of modernization and urbanization. Instead of veneration, the aged are being edged out to the margins of society. And sadly, in families where the good tradition survives, the caregivers themselves are already experiencing the frailty of life. While most of those who need care will be over 80 years, many who push their wheelchairs, provide hot meals, and give home comfort will be pensioners beyond 60 years of age. As more and more people are drawn to the urban setting and lifestyle, migration, dislocation, and breakdown of community and social bonds will be on the rise. In today's urban and work-dominated life, community, integrity, social life, and the elderly are the primary victims. These make a compelling case for the need to regenerate social bonds and revitalize communities as a prerequisite to happiness. To begin with, innovative policies and programs to motivate and facilitate geographic dispersal of habitation are options that merit consideration. Social support and participation for the elderly is one of the most important enablers of aging with grandeur and happiness as must be. Old age must come with reverence and gratitude from loved ones, and the young must receive the benefit of its boundless affection and wisdom. The establishment of such conditions call for actions far beyond financial arrangements. Yet, the cost of inaction is just too severe to contemplate. It must thus be the endeavor of compassionate leaders to create environments wherein aging comes without fear of insecurity and pain of loneliness. The good news is that for many countries and their leaders, time affords them the opportunity to anticipate, plan, and act. And for the elderly societies, there are options that good leadership knowledge can find when motivated by compassion and undertaken with strength of purpose and conviction. Second, the rate of our biodiversity loss is slowing down, or is it? Well, it isn't. It is accelerating both on surface and in water. And with the disappearance of each species of plant, insect, bird, or animal, Homo sapiens inch closer to its own extinction. Going by the current trends, biodiversity destruction will continue in tandem with the expansion of monoculture cropping deforestation, excessive fishing, greenhouse gas emissions, pollution of air and water, etc. The dramatic loss of biodiversity is a clear evidence of our failure to live in harmony with nature. It is an unmistakable sign that in systematically abusing nature to appease our insatiable cravings, we are destroying our very source of sustenance. Leaders must have knowledge of the higher truth that all life forms are interrelated, and that it is the harmony and the vitality of our interdependence which will ensure mutual survival. We are but only one of the inhabitants of this planet, and as the most dominant, we have the burden of greater responsibility. The loss of biodiversity is not to be understood as the extinction of this or that species, but the severance of relationships towards mutually assured destruction. From this point of view, the toleration of ecological destruction is unconscionable and questions the intelligence and rationality of human society. From all that we have seen and witnessed, it will require tremendous strength of leadership founded on compassion for those affected and for the sake of our future generations to overcome the foolishly powerful resistance to the knowledge-based solutions that will no doubt have huge costs but will ensure our long-term survival and well-being. Third, our persistent reliance on inefficient fossil fuel-dependent technologies and wasteful consumption continue to destabilize climate and environment. The effect of climate change, especially in agriculture, is adding new and mounting challenges to the health and indeed survival of the largest section of our regional population, the rural farmers. In the most extreme cases, crop failures have literally meant end of life for many families, with tens of thousands being driven to suicide. That so little should be written and spoken about this by leaders and by the media is a reflection of the lack of interest in critical knowledge and the shameful deficit of compassion. The slow erosion and the submergence of fertile and densely populated coastal regions and the drying of the rivers and lakes with devastating consequences for all forms of life are poignantly tragic, more so for the reason that these are conceivably avoidable. The Stern Review has estimated that investment to the order of 1% of global GDP per year in new technologies is the bare minimum necessary to stem emissions. We all know that GDP, or income per capita, is not equally distributed over the globe. But the reasoning that emissions per capita is not equally distributed across the globe must not be used as moral justification to pollute more and stand against the need to build a consensus on the need to take remedial action or to undertake investment in new technologies. Humanity has no choice, and such justifications cannot change that reality. But even if we were to make appreciable gains in the development and application of new technologies, the dire need to rein in our consumerist passion and to reduce wasteful consumption by the richer sections of our society will not diminish. Learning to live better with less is entirely possible and responsible. Leaders must aspire to pave a new path to living well without greed being the determining factor and material possessions being the definition of status and success? Could we not change perceptions, whereby excessive consumption becomes conspicuous and embarrassing? Could we not dignify simple and responsible living? For example, while we continue to develop and make affordable energy, efficient and non-fossil fuel dependent vehicles, we could learn to move more on the soles of our feet and make it socially an admirable and a desirable thing to do. As, in fact, I must appreciate, many in New York, in fact, do. In the same vein, I'm using a computer. I've now lost my para. The hazards of modern technology for an ancient civilization like that of Bhutan, to which I belong. I'll find it. In the same vein, we would convince ourselves of the virtue of localizing food production and rooting material needs in the immediacy of our surroundings. There too is the need to redefine well-being that will enable sustained happiness as a timeless human endeavor. But we need to do so in quite different ways from the way we are used to. A variety of market and non-market measures has to be taken urgently, given that we cannot depend solely on the market for investment into new technologies. As the Stern Review mentions, there are no markets with rates of return for public investment decisions over a period as long as 100 years. The review mentions that the key mistake made by economists in the past, working on the economics of climate change, was to use market discount rate. One would hope that switching to new technologies will not prove too unaffordable for low-income countries. Coordinated international policies must ensure they become accessible on a wider basis. But if the transfer of new technologies is seen merely as another way of shifting global income and prosperity, they will not spread rapidly and evenly. At the same time, I'm hopeful that the industrial competition for scarce resources, such as rare metals and rare earth, for the manufacture of electrical engines and other revolutionary technologies do not undermine peace and stability. Fourth, the relentless growth of the weapons industry. An increasing expenditure on weapons-based security and military personnel continue to divert resources from human well-being-related development. The same 19th century logic of security arrangement, cooperation, and alliance gives a sense of security to some, while forcing others to follow the same logic in an atmosphere of relative and comparative insecurity. I think it is possible for us to realize that it is not security, but insecurity we create by the spread of arms and expansion of armies. The persistence of security blocs and the weapons industry are a major obstacle to the emergence of a new consciousness of belonging to one planet with common stakes and a shared destiny. Would it be too bold for me to advocate a departure from the old logic of security to move to a future of non-adversarial security system whereby legions of peace guardians are maintained at regional peace centers, where gradually decommissioning of the military and real disarmament are undertaken? Would it be childish naivety on my part to dream of such legions equipped and trained in completely non-conventional and non-military ways of non-violence, non-confrontation, and conciliation. Fifth, the juxtaposition of unhealthy lifestyles and strivings for longer life has resulted in the intensification of healthcare enabled by the allocation of an increasing amount of personal income and state revenue to Medicare. But long life is not necessarily worthwhile, not for the rising number and proportion of people whose extended life means prolongation of loneliness and suffering of painful indignities. How do we as a human society hear and respond to the call for the restoration of vital and venerable old age by those who, banished to the fringes of society, are too afraid to die and too fearful to wake up each day? Here, I must allude to G&H, which has so much to do with promoting a successful cycle of birth, living, aging, and dying. This is not a matter of individual choice. It is within the broader context of favorable structures that a happy and healthy life, mentally and physically, can be enjoyed. The quality of life is determined not by individual circumstances alone, but substantially by the structural conditions of society which we collectively create. To be born successful means zero infant and maternal mortality. But being born well into a rich family and physical environment is not everything. To grow and to be raised well, children need good parenthood, a good neighborhood, creative education, and so forth. These kinds of social capital are depreciating significantly across the world, especially in urban areas. Successful living means having a contributory, fulfilling, and meaningful work life, not simply earning to consume or saving for old age. We find from our G&H surveys in Bhutan that it is at the peak of our health, say from 35 to 45 years of age, when we should be enjoying ourselves, that the curve of subjective well-being dips and bottoms out. Therein lies a serious case for restructuring our 5-day, 9-to-5 working week. It is not conceivable, rather inconceivable, to have 25 hours of work in a week of intensively creative and productive work and pursue diverse interests for the remaining part of the week to become whole again and to be rejuvenated. This would allow, among other things, the spread of employment and income, more leisure time for everybody, and a physically and mentally healthy population. The pressure to work hard in the middle section of our life to be financially successful before we swiftly reach our pensionable age is indeed too grim and brutal. In this regard, I felt encouraged by the recent UK government decision which states that employers cannot pension off people at 65 if they choose to keep working. Ladies and gentlemen, I have shared my thoughts on the Himalayan view of what makes good leaders, and likewise, I have outlined some of the current and future challenges that a leader will inevitably face. I have touched briefly on the need for us to redefine the purpose of life and meaning of well-being so that our pursuits in life and the way we organize our society and create its values are in conformity. In other words, I have dwelt on some of the main concerns that must be addressed in the course of development that aims to promote a happy and a contented society. The contemplation of the impermanence of self and others, just like a good pilgrim on a journey does, is a useful engagement for any leader. It is one of the Eastern routes, a Himalayan one, for a leader to transform towards a higher ground of broad global awareness and knowledge, and to be guided by a sense of compassion that generates the strength to act not only within the sphere of one's direct responsibility, but the benefit of all sentient beings. After all, as I've said before, ours is an interdependent world of shrinking space, diminishing resources, and mounting challenges for our collective survival. I thank you for the gracious floor that you have given me and for your kind invitation, Mr. President. Thank you. Tashidelik.
Mr. Prime Minister, I know I speak for all of us in expressing gratitude for such a remarkable talk. This is not exactly the daily fare that we're hearing in our campaign season here. And so you've given us an opportunity to quietly open our eyes and minds and brains to the wisdom that you're bringing. And it's my great pleasure to open the floor now for questions. We have a few minutes with the Prime Minister for Q&A, and then we have a reception afterwards. So we have a wonderful opportunity as a group for some discussion and then in individual exchange afterwards. So I would request that people that would like to ask a question, there are 2 microphones. When you come up, please make it a question, make it brief, and before asking the question, introduce yourself if you would.
May I start? Maria Sadowska, Graduate School of Journalism. Mr. Prime Minister, I would like you to explain what do you see a value in free speech and freedom of expression and free press in reaching those goals of all common happiness in the world and democratization of your country? Thank you.
You know, when I heard about this question and answer session, I wasn't nervous at all because Jeffrey was going to be here. So the questions that I cannot answer, he will answer. Also now I discover I might need him to perhaps, I couldn't hear your question, so perhaps, yes.
Okay, I will repeat. Do you think that freedom of press and freedom of expression are the elements of the road to overall happiness which we need to pursue? And what's the role of free press you see for your country? And I'm from Graduate School of Journalism.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I think I can manage that. Very important. I think it's one of the most critical elements, and in fact, in one of the recent publications, research publications, it has been reported that freedom is a major contributing factor to people feeling happy, feeling secure. And so likewise, in the case of Bhutan, a country that pursues happiness, the freedom of the media, the freedom of the press is very, very important, to the extent that my government has gone on record for having publicly stated that it is not just 3 branches of government that we have, but 4 branches of governance. And the 4th is the media. We feel that in an emerging democracy such as ours, the media has to play an important role so that it becomes well established, so that it remains irreversible. And so, as much as possible, we are trying to give and provide resources to the media without in any way interfering with their independence and separateness.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joel, and I'm an undergraduate at Columbia. And you mentioned that a good leader should have compassion for all sentient beings. And I'm wondering if gross domestic happiness includes animals as well. And if so, how do you judge if an animal is happy or not?
Very difficult question. I'm not so sure whether we have any kind of means yet devised to measure the happiness level of animals. But what we do know is that animals, insects, birds need their space as well in order that they can function and they can survive and live as they are meant to, as equal members and owners of this planet. And so Bhutan today, because we have been pursuing the philosophy, the policy of gross national happiness, Bhutan today happens to be, despite being as small as it is, a country that has been admired, among others, by the Worldwide Fund for Nature. We have here an ex-president of WWF here, which recognized Bhutan as one of the hotspots of biodiversity, a country with tremendous biodiversity. And that continues to be so. And one of the first things that my government did upon being elected to govern was to expand the protected area in Bhutan. And today, 51% of Bhutan's territory falls under protected area. And also, having persisted with this philosophy, this development philosophy, Bhutan today is becoming greener and not browner, despite demographic growth, despite agricultural expansion, urbanization, and industrialization. Today, we have 72% of forest cover. While the Constitution requires that for all times, Bhutan must have a minimum of 60% of forest.
Thank you.
My name is David Aboud. I'm a freshman at Columbia College. And I went to school in the Himalayas also, and a lot of my friends were Bhutanese. And so my question for you is why, if Bhutan is so committed to this idea of gross national happiness, why so many of its elite and so many of its people in general must leave Bhutan to be educated elsewhere, and why Bhutan has not done more to give more opportunities for those who want to be educated in Bhutan?
If you're talking about Bhutanese students studying here in the United States, it just happens to be because this country has the best education institutions, the best systems, the best mentors in the world.
Well, it's
and we want a bit of that.
It's not just in the United States, but in India as well, where I went to school and where you
yes,
also
it's
were
true. In India, in Australia, in many Anglophone countries. And that will continue to be so. One thing is that Bhutan wants to benefit from the diversity of educational resources that are spread across the world. While at the same time, you have to remember that Bhutan's development process has been very slow, very methodical, as was necessary for a country in pursuit of happiness, wanting to ensure that equilibrium, balances were not disturbed, that culture and values were not in any way disrupted. We had to go slowly. And today, let me tell you that we will be among the first lesser developed countries to achieve universal primary enrollment. And our university and institutions of higher learning continue to grow and expand. But among all our budgetary allocations for various sectors, education receives the highest. Human resource development is a priority. And even as educational institutions in our country continue to grow, we will ensure that our students, through government scholarship and through the support of various developing countries, will receive access to institutions such as Happy Columbia.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lauren Anderson. I'm from the School of Public Health. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I was curious, when you use happiness as a measure, does that interfere or complicate doing different health interventions that might be helpful maybe to 2% of the population, but if the whole population then has to go through testing, is that am I making some sense?
Well, so far, the provision of basic and essential health services, providing comprehensive, our efforts to provide comprehensive basic health care service in Bhutan has never really been in conflict with our policy of, as, well, the paradigm of J&H. But I imagine that as we go along, as our society becomes more and more sophisticated, as our health capacity grows and develops, there will be questions and issues of the kind that you raise, of the kind that your modern society, your advanced society are faced with. But presently, there hasn't been difficulties. And for instance, if we were to talk about AIDS and HIV, for instance, the incidence level is very low. The total number of HIV-infected people in our country, as reported thus far, is only 168. But we are not complacent. And the government ensures that each of them has direct state-provided support to antiretroviral medication. And the state also has a policy whereby, since we don't know how the larger population may react, while a lot of advocacy is being done so that people know the content, the implications of this disease, we maintain absolute confidentiality as to the identity of those people who are infected.
Great, thank you.
I think in line with our schedule, we'll take 2 more questions. I apologize, but then there will be time at the reception. So one here, and then second, the last one here.
Hi, it's Ryan. I'm a Master's of Computer Science here, and I'm just wondering if you feel that there's any impact of Buddhist teaching on gross national happiness.
I'm going to ask
of the Buddhist philosophy. Is there any connection between that and gross national happiness? You mentioned that yours is a Buddhist society.
I do believe that there are many Buddhist scholars here, so they can help me with this question. But let me tell you that gross national happiness is a philosophy that was conceived by our king, who is often referred to as a Dharma king, a Buddhist king. And our entire culture happens to be steeped and founded on Bhutanese values and the teachings of the Dharma. And for instance, even when I spoke of the 3 qualities of leadership, with compassion being the most important, we are talking about Buddhist values, Buddhist ethos. And one of the things that Buddhism teaches us is detachment, to control one's greed, and so on. And these are very much, in harmony with, rather, these are the values on which the development paradigm of Bhutan is founded. No conflict at all. But if anybody wishes to elaborate on this, I would like to learn.
Hi, I'm Camille from the School of International Public Affairs. Camille from the School of International Public Affairs. And you mentioned that one of the characteristics of a good leader is compassion, and you also mentioned that security and spending on defense takes away from human development. How do you see these 2 aspects play a role in countries that face security concerns through prolonged conflicts?
Well, as I said, one of the first things we do is decommission our military, and close down our weapons manufacturing. but that would be too naive, as I said. But as I said in my address, even the most radical of thoughts and ideas today may become the dogma of tomorrow. And I think as young people, as future leaders of this and many countries that you represent, I think you have to be daring. You have to build your vision of a better country. And you do so by asking the kind of questions that you do. I welcome that question. In my own country, the military is not an important organ of state. It is more a ceremonial, an organization that has ceremonial functions. But at times, there are occasions when it does need to play a military role. But it is our hope that not too far in the distant future, we will be able to create organizations for the maintenance of peace and security that will not require the use of weapons of destruction.
Prime Minister, you've given us a lot to think about, and I hope our SEPA students also can take your challenge and think about, in your region, the fact that the military spending in Afghanistan is about 10 times the country's national income each year. And yet, the situation deteriorates in that country rather than improves. So how to turn something so large economically but so futile into something more promising, I think, is really the Prime Minister's message. We have to listen very closely to what you said and to ponder it. I take a note of comfort in the fact that our country was founded also on a claim of an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we have in our tradition also a stakehold in this idea. I think there are many of us who feel we're losing our way right now, and the wisdom that you've brought today, I think, can help us find a way to that path. So on behalf of Columbia University, the happiest university in the United States, for good reason, the wonderful leadership of our president, and a remarkable student body. Let me thank you, Prime Minister, for being here.